The moon kept following my car, but its reflection in the windshield was smiling. I noticed it first the way you notice a mistake in a photograph only after you've already looked away, too late, and with the uncomfortable certainty that it had been there the whole time. The moon hung low over the highway, a pale disk riding the horizon to my right. I'd been driving long enough that its presence felt companionable, a silent marker of time and direction. It slid behind trees, reappeared between gaps, dipped when the road dipped. Normal. Expected. What wasn't expected was the second moon. It hovered faintly in the windshield glass, superimposed over the dark road ahead. A reflection, I told myself. The interior lights were off, the dashboard dimmed to its lowest setting, but glass always lies a little at night. I'd learned that on long drives, how reflections layered the world until inside and outside blurred together. I adjusted my posture, craning my neck. The reflected moon moved with me, drifting slightly across the windshield. When I leaned left, it leaned left. When I leaned right, it followed. "See," I murmured, my voice swallowed by the hum of tires on asphalt. Just glass. The highway stretched straight and empty, a narrow ribbon cut through rolling fields and low trees. No houses, no exits. The reflective paint on the lane markers flashed rhythmically beneath my headlights, each dash appearing, vanishing, appearing again. It was hypnotic, the kind of visual metronome that lulled your thoughts into a soft, wandering drift. I rolled down the window an inch. Cold air slipped in, carrying the dry scent of dust and distant pine. The sound of the road sharpened, a rougher hiss beneath the engine's steady purr. I focused on that, grounding myself in it. The reflected moon was brighter now. I frowned and glanced up at the real one. It hadn't changed. Still pale, still distant, its surface smooth and indifferent. But in the windshield, its twin glowed with a warmer light, as if something inside it were pressing outward. I blinked hard. The reflected moon blinked back. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. The car held its lane, obedient and solid, and for a moment I wondered if exhaustion had finally crossed the line into hallucination. I'd been awake too long. I'd pushed past the point where coffee helped, past the point where music kept me alert. I turned the radio off an hour ago because even familiar songs felt intrusive, like they were coming from too close to my head. "Just tired," I said. Saying it out loud made it sound less convincing. The reflection shifted again, sliding lower on the glass until it hovered just above the hood line. As it moved, the light warped slightly, the edges stretching and compressing as though the glass were breathing. I reached up and wiped the windshield with the sleeve of my jacket. The fabric squeaked faintly. The reflection smeared, then reformed, clearer than before. And that was when I saw it wasn't a perfect circle anymore. The bottom edge curved upward, subtly at first, like a trick of contrast. I stared, my breath slowing without my permission. The curve deepened, becoming unmistakable. A smile, not a cartoon grin, not teeth, just the suggestion of expression etched into light. A crescent-shaped bend that made the reflected moon look amused, observant. I laughed, a thin, brittle sound. That's clever," I said, though I had no idea who I was talking to. The road dipped, and for a heartbeat the real moon disappeared behind a low hill. The reflected one did not. It stayed exactly where it was, suspended in the windshield, smiling. My stomach dropped. I pressed the accelerator a little harder. The engine responded, the speedometer needle creeping up. The darkness ahead thickened, swallowing my headlights faster than before, as if the night itself had grown more absorbent. The smile widened. I told myself it was pareidolia, my brain forcing meaning onto a familiar shape. People saw faces in clouds, in wood grain, in the scorch marks on toast. This was no different, except that the reflection tilted slightly, as if angling itself to keep me in view. A soft sound filled the car, so quiet I felt it more than heard it. A faint, rhythmic whisper, like breath passing over lips. I held my own breath, listening. The whisper continued. It wasn't coming from outside. It wasn't the wind through the cracked window or the tires on the road. It seemed to emanate from the glass itself, vibrating faintly through the steering wheel. "Stop," I said, the word coming out hoarse. "Just stop." The reflected moon's smile held steady. I tried to look away, fixing my eyes on the center line rushing toward me. But the reflection lingered in my peripheral vision, a pale curve that seemed to tug at my attention. Every time I blinked, it felt closer. The highway sign loomed ahead, green and reflective. I welcomed it like proof that the world still obeyed rules. As I passed beneath it, its letters flashed bright and legible. I didn't read them, because in the windshield, the reflected moon briefly overlaid the sign, and for an instant the smile seemed to stretch, aligning perfectly with the curve of the sign's lower edge. The whispering sound deepened, taking on a cadence that almost felt like speech. I slammed my hand against the dashboard, the sharp impact grounding me. The reflection jittered, then settled again, unbothered. My thoughts began to slip, edges softening. I wondered if I'd always driven alone at night, or if there had been other trips I couldn't quite remember, other long stretches of road where something had watched me from the glass and waited for me to notice. The reflected moon drifted closer to my face. I could see texture in it now. Not craters, but something smoother, stretched tight like skin pulled over bone. The smile wasn't etched into the surface anymore. It moved, flexing subtly, responding to my breathing. "Get a grip," I whispered. "You're seeing things." The whisper answered, closer now, warm against my ears. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the intent. It was pleased. It had been patient. The real moon slid higher in the sky, pulling ahead of me as the road curved. The reflected one stayed centered, unwavering. When I turned my head, it didn't move. It watched. A pressure settled in the passenger seat, light but definite, as if someone had just leaned forward. The car dipped slightly on its suspension. I smelled something faint and unfamiliar, like cold metal and ozone. I kept my eyes on the road. I did not look to the side. In the windshield, the reflected moon smiled wider, and for the first time, I saw a second curve forming above it, a hint of eyes opening where there had been only light before. The whispering stopped. In the silence that followed, I felt a presence settle fully into the car, close enough that the glass no longer needed to pretend it was alone with me. I drove past a police checkpoint, but every officer turned their head in perfect unison. I didn't expect to see anyone out there. The highway had been empty for nearly an hour, a straight black corridor slicing through scrubland and low hills. No exits, no rest stops, no glow of distant towns. Just the road, my headlights, and the steady, reassuring hum of the engine. Even the radio had given up, dissolving into static before falling silent altogether, as if the air itself had thinned. So when reflective cones appeared ahead, catching my headlights and flaring orange, my first feeling wasn't fear. It was relief. I slowed instinctively. The cones funneled traffic me toward the shoulder, where several patrol cars were parked at angles, light bars off. No flashing red and blue, no sirens. Just dark silhouettes and the muted shine of badges when the light hit them right. Police checkpoint. Out here. That should have felt normal, reassuring even. But something about it sat wrong in my chest, like a thought I couldn't quite form. The officers stood in a loose line along the road's edge, 5 of them, spaced evenly. They weren't talking. They weren't moving. Their uniforms were dark enough to blend into the night, their faces pale ovals under their caps. I rolled closer, foot hovering over the brake. Gravel crunched softly under my tires as I eased to a near stop. The air felt heavier here, dense and close, as if sound itself didn't want to travel. None of them raised a hand. I waited for a signal, an arm lifted, a flashlight beam, anything. Nothing came. The officers simply stood there, facing the road ahead, gazes fixed somewhere past me, as though they were watching something I couldn't see. My heart began to beat harder, faster than the situation warranted. I told myself they were tired, bored, working a long, dull shift on a dead stretch of highway. I crept forward another few feet. That's when it happened. All 5 officers turned their heads at the exact same moment. No delay, no variation, just a smooth, synchronized motion like gears engaging. Their chins swung toward me, stopping with mechanical precision. 5 pairs of eyes locked onto my windshield. The effect was immediate and visceral. My stomach clenched, and a cold wave washed up my spine, prickling the base of my skull. The world seemed to narrow, the darkness pressing in until there was only the road, the officers, and my own shallow breathing. They didn't step closer. They didn't speak. They just watched. Their faces were wrong. Not distorted, not monstrous, just empty, emotionless in a way that didn't feel human. No curiosity, no suspicion, no recognition. Their eyes reflected my headlights dully, like glass marbles left out in the rain. I swallowed and forced myself to breathe evenly. You're projecting, I thought. You're tired. Anyone would be unsettled by this. I cracked my window an inch. The night air slid in, cold and dry. Evening, I said, my voice sounding too loud in the stillness. No response. I glanced at the nearest patrol car, expecting to see movement inside. A glow from a dashboard, a silhouette shifting. The car was dark, empty as far as I could tell. Memory stirred uneasily. I tried to recall the last sign I'd passed, the last town, the last place where the world had felt anchored. The details slipped away as soon as I reached for them, like names on the tip of my tongue. One of the officers blinked. Then they all did, perfectly together. A bead of sweat traced a slow line down my back. I felt suddenly exposed, as if the glass around me were thinning, becoming less a barrier and more a suggestion. Am I okay to go? I asked. The words seemed to sink into the night without leaving a ripple. The officer closest to my window tilted his head a fraction, not inquisitively, but as though adjusting his angle of view. I caught a glimpse of his eyes again and felt a strange, irrational certainty bloom. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking through me. The realization made my hands tremble on the steering wheel. I became acutely aware of my body, of my heartbeat, my breath, the weight of my limbs, as if I needed to confirm I was still solid. I eased my foot off the brake. The car rolled forward. The officers didn't move to stop me. They didn't step aside either. I drove between them, the space narrowing until I felt like I was passing through a gate. As I did, every head turned with me, tracking my motion in flawless synchronization. Their eyes followed the car, not breaking contact even as I drew level, even as I passed them. For a heartbeat, I considered stopping completely, putting the car in park, demanding answers. The urge was strong, irrational, like stepping off a ledge just to see if you'd fall. I didn't. I pressed the gas gently and continued on, the cones thinning behind me, the checkpoint dissolving into darkness. In the rearview mirror, I saw them still standing there, heads turned, watching the space where my car had been. When the road straightened and the checkpoint disappeared from view, I let out a shaky laugh. "Jesus," I muttered. "Get a grip." The sound of my own voice felt like a relief, proof that I still existed in a way that could be heard. I drove on. Minutes passed, maybe more. Time felt unreliable, stretching and compressing in odd ways. The highway remained empty, the darkness unbroken. Then I noticed the smell. It was faint at first, something sterile and metallic, like the inside of a hospital or the air after a thunderstorm. I sniffed, confused, and checked the vents. The heater was on low, pulling air from outside. The smell didn't fade. I glanced at the rearview mirror. For a split second, I thought I saw movement. 5 pale shapes standing impossibly far back on the road, too distant to be real. I blinked, and the mirror showed only darkness and the twin red dots of my taillights. My pulse thudded in my ears. You passed them, I told myself. That's it. It's over. But the certainty wouldn't settle. I became aware of a sensation on my skin, a subtle pressure, like the aftermath of being stared at too long. I shifted in my seat, uneasy. A mile marker slid past. The number made no sense to me. I was sure I'd seen the same one earlier, but I couldn't be certain. The memory felt borrowed, secondhand. I tried to recall the officers' faces in detail. I could picture the shape of their hats, the line of their shoulders, but their features blurred when I focused on them, like faces in a dream that refused to resolve. The smell grew stronger. The radio clicked on by itself. Static filled the car, then settled into a low, even hiss. Beneath it, there was a faint pattern, a rhythm that tugged at my attention. Not words, something closer to breathing. I reached to turn it off. Before my fingers touched the knob, the sound stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. I became aware, with sudden, bone-deep certainty, that I was no longer alone. Not in the obvious way, not with a figure in the seat beside me or a shape in the back. It was subtler than that, a presence layered over my own, occupying the same space, sharing my outline. As if something had learned me. The highway ahead stretched on, unchanged, but I felt different. Observed from the inside, catalogued. In the rearview mirror, for just an instant, I saw a pale oval where my own face should have been, emotionless, eyes reflecting nothing but the road ahead. Then my reflection blinked, and I knew, without understanding how, that wherever I was going next, I wouldn't be arriving alone.